She looked up at me through the rain with those dark alien eyes and said, voice barely holding, "You do not know who I am." I looked down at her, crown knocked sideways, blue skin pale from cold, shaking, and I said, "You're someone who's hurt and it's raining." That's enough for me. My name is Cole Reed. I fix things. Specifically, I repair atmospheric processors on the lower docking tiers of Velmara Station, which is the kind of work that puts you in maintenance corridors and service alleys at all hours and teaches you to be useful with your hands and unimportant with everything else. I was unimportant. I was good at it. I had my tools, my small quarters on level 4, my work rotation, and 14 months of keeping my head down on a station where most species outranked me by default. Humans were tolerated on Velmara Station the way that a functional but unremarkable tool is tolerated, present, occasionally useful, not worth acknowledging socially. I was walking back from a double shift on a Thursday night when the storm system hit. Velmara Station's upper tiers had open atmospheric zones, large sections of the station exposed to the orbital weather systems of the planet below, which usually meant a light chemical mist and sometimes meant nothing at all. That Thursday it meant a full atmospheric pressure event, the kind the station's weather management system flagged twice a year. Cold, heavy, relentless, the kind of rain that found every gap in your gear. I was already soaked through my Carhartt before I reached the Level 3 service corridor. I cut through the commercial plaza shortcut, faster, covered, and that was when I found her. She was sitting on the pavement of the plaza's outer edge where the coverage ended and the rain came down full. She was not sheltering. She was sitting in it, which was the first thing I noticed, because everyone else in the plaza had pressed back under the awnings, and she was simply sitting in the open getting drenched, in clothes that cost more than my annual contract, with a crown in her hair that I did not immediately recognize as anything more than ornate jewelry. She was crying. Not the performed kind. The real kind, the quiet, sustained kind that happens when something has broken past whatever wall a person built to contain it and they have simply run out of the energy to keep it in. She was not making a scene. She was just present in the rain with wet golden hair across her face and her hands in her lap and tears running down blue cheeks that the rain made indistinguishable from the rain. I stopped. I should not have stopped. Every instinct that 14 months on Velmara Station had built said, "Not your problem, not your tear, keep moving, stay unimportant." I stopped anyway. I crouched down a few feet from her, close enough to be present, far enough to not loom, and I said, because I couldn't think of anything better, "Hey, you all right?" She looked up at me. The eyes were dark and alien and currently devastated, and she looked at me the way people look at something unexpected. Not threatening, just wrong category, a human male in a work jacket crouching in the rain asking if she was all right. She said, "You do not know who I am." I said, "You're someone who's hurt and it's raining." That's enough for me. She stared at me for 3 full seconds. Then something in her expression cracked open a little further, not worse, but differently, like a door shifting on a hinge. I took off my Carhartt jacket. It was soaked, but it was still warmer than nothing, and I held it out to her. She looked at the jacket. She looked at me. "I am the Heir of 3 Empires," she said, with the careful precision of someone who has said this phrase thousands of times and usually uses it as armor. "Okay," I said. The jacket was still out. "Are you warm enough?" Another silence. Then she took the jacket. Her name was Elindra Vell. She was 23 years old. The 3 empires whose combined inheritance rested on her were the Velmara Sovereignty, the Thorn Collective, and the Outer Ring Territories, a political structure so vast and so observed that she had not, she told me later, been alone without staff or security in 4 years. She had been alone for approximately 40 minutes before I found her. Her security detail had lost her in the crowd during the storm. She had, it became clear, allowed herself to be lost, had deliberately slipped the rotation in a way that suggested practice, because she had received news that morning that her formal betrothal had been finalized without her input to a political alliance she had been told about the way you are told about weather, as a fact, not a question. I did not know any of this yet. I knew that she was shaking. I sat down beside her on the wet pavement. Not because I had a plan. Because she was there and she was shaking, and sitting beside someone when they are shaking is a basic human thing that I did not need a rank to do. We sat in the rain for a few minutes without talking. Then she said, quietly, "Why are you still here?" "Because you're still shaking," I said. She looked at her hands. Then, without saying anything, she leaned sideways and put her head against my shoulder. Her crown pressed into my collarbone. Her wet golden hair spread across my jacket that she'd put over her own shoulders. Her hand found the front of my shirt and gripped it, not dramatically, just the specific grip of someone who needs something to hold. I stayed still. The rain came down. I did not ask her about the 3 empires. I did not ask her what was wrong. I did not calculate what any of this meant, or who was watching, or what a level 4 atmospheric processor repair technician was supposed to do with the Heir of 3 Empires leaning against him on a wet plaza floor. I put my arm around her shoulders because she was cold, and because it was the right thing to do, and because nothing else about the situation required a more complicated reason. Her security detail found us 22 minutes later. 6 armored figures in imperial livery coming at speed through the plaza. The kind of controlled panic that highly trained personnel perform when they have lost someone important and found them somewhere impossible. They stopped when they saw us. The senior officer, a tall Velmara woman in formal armor, looked at me with an expression I could not fully parse. Then she looked at Elindra, still against my shoulder, and said something in Velmara formal register that my translation chip rendered as, "Your Highness." We were concerned. Elindra did not move immediately. She straightened slowly, with the particular care of someone returning to a version of themselves they had set down for a while. She handed me back my jacket. She looked at me and I looked at her, and there was something in her eyes that was not the devastation from before. Something steadier, like a person who has been somewhere real for 20 minutes and is carrying it back with them. She said, in standard, so I would understand, "Your name." "Cole Reed," I said. "Level 4. Atmospheric Systems." She nodded once. Then she stood and the security detail closed around her and she walked back into the station. I sat on the wet pavement for another minute. Then I put my soaked jacket back on and stood up and went home. 3 days later a formal document arrived at my quarters from the Imperial Household Administration. It was an appointment. Human Technical Liaison, Imperial Vessel Velsora, immediate assignment, compensation at senior staff rate. No explanation. No context. At the bottom, in handwritten Velmara script that my translation chip rendered quietly. You stayed. A. I held the document for a long time in my small level 4 quarters. Then I packed my tools.